Hello there, YouTube. So, I thought I'd have a little chat about magic. Like magic specifically in games like Dungeons & Dragons, but in any fantasy game or book or film, anything like that. This applies to all of them. But for me specifically, I'm talking about Dungeons & Dragons, and games that are very similar to Dungeons & Dragons. And that is that magic in these games is basically future tech. And it should be treated as such. One of the things that always pisses me off when playing D&D is how it's still a medieval world when it clearly should be a neo-futuristic world. And I use as my example the Forgotten Realms 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons base setting. This is a world that should be at like Star Trek levels of power. And yet they still live in a sort of medieval-esque, maybe very early Renaissance stylistic tech level. And they shouldn't be. And why? And that's magic. Magic is not rare in these systems. There are magic guilds, there are bardic colleges, there are whole magic universities and libraries everywhere. There's big schools of magic in all the major cities. Loads of named magic characters, and whole magic societies that work with and against each other in various different ways. So this world is one where magic is commonplace. If magic's commonplace, then every single major state would have used it in order to, first of all, set up their military, their governmental system. They'd have changed the way that the world works. Simple things like prestidigitation. This is the ability to do simple parlor trick magic, but it's more than just that. Like these so-called parlor tricks, they can do amazing things. Like simple things like you can flavour food for 1 hour. So you'd never have bad food ever again because you'd always have someone in the kitchens once you prepared your food, flavour with prestidigitation, take it out, and it's always going to taste amazing all the time. So that's one small change, but also you can unsoil things. So cleaning is always going to be done through magic. Everyone should be perfectly clean at all times because there's always going to be some just go prestidigitation, clean. This is a cantrip. You can cast it every 6 seconds forever. So there's no reason not to. So your clothes get cleaned instantly. The house gets cleaned instantly. You basically have instant household chores done for you. You can light a candle with the click of a finger, that kind of thing. Little things, but this is just one spell, and it's just a little parlor trick spell. What about others? Well, let's go for one of the big ones. Teleportation. Teleportation would change the world. This isn't just another way of travelling. This is a method of travel that would revolutionise our world right now. And they don't just have one form of teleportation, they have many. They have things like Misty Step, which is very short range, but that would change so many different things. Like, you couldn't have windows in buildings because people could just Misty Step through the window, because you have to have line of sight, I believe, though I think you might actually be able to do it without it. You could just teleport straight in. So anything that needs to be secure now needs to be secured against someone just misty stepping through a wall. So that can't work. Then there's Dimension Door, which is up to 500 meters. That immediately means that people can get out of a prison cell. They could get into a bank vault. That one definitely doesn't need line of sight. And that. Again, it's not overly high end as a spell, so like, the way that crime and the justice system would change because of that, you would need to completely construct your towns around this, because if someone has the ability to teleport, they're just going to be able to run roughshod over everything. Then there's things like teleportation and teleportation circle, which lets you go anywhere on the planet. There's now no need for shipping. There's now no need for carts, river travel, caravans, any of this. You don't need to build any of it. All you do is you set up a teleportation circle wherever you need it to be, and you just teleport everything from one place to another instantly. Like, the person who can make teleportation circles would be the most valuable person in your society, because it would change the logistics of every situation. Everything will come down to teleportations. So, but teleportation's a high-level spell, so maybe that's how. Maybe it's rare enough that it's not changing society all that much, though it would be a key part of every major city. So, what about just infrastructure? There's two spells that jump out here, and that is Fabricate and Mending. Fabricate means that everything that's ever constructed is now done through magic. Like, Fabricate is a high enough level spell that not everyone can cast it, but it's low enough that it could be reasonably done by these mages guilds. So they are fabricating everything from buildings to vehicles to specialised devices. They can fabricate anything and anything. All they need is a design to follow, and they just cast the spell. No need for master craftsmen, no need for expensive production lines. This is the automated 3D printer in magic form. So this should basically mean that they now have mass production, because all you would do is train wizards. You would train them high enough to reach the fabricate spell, and then you'd stick them in a factory and just have them fabricate things over and over again. Like, this is going to be so much easier and cheaper and more valuable. Like, all it would take is a well-trained wizard, and they can cast this many times a day before they need to go to sleep. And then they rest up for the night. They can do it multiple times again the next day. This is going to be faster than any factory you could ever build, and this is supposed to be a medieval society, so this is before the production line has existed. This would revolutionise every industry in the world. And that's the Fabricate spell. What about the Mending spell? The Mending spell is a cantrip, which means anyone could reasonably learn it with only a little bit of tutelage, and if they know it, they can do it whenever they like. This makes obsolescence impossible. Every single object, it breaks, you cast a spell, it fixes itself. This changes the world immediately, because now you have no need to worry about any kind of breakages, any kind of waste. It wouldn't happen. Like, you could smash a glass jar, like literally take a glass jar, smash it into a million pieces, cast Mending, and all those pieces immediately knit themselves back together again. So long as the jar was no bigger than a foot across. That's ridiculous levels of power. Mending would change the entire face of society. There would be no need for repair shops. There'd be no need for artisans. You'd buy one thing, it would last you a lifetime. It would not just last you a lifetime. The first thing you buy it, so long as you have access to Mending, you could pass that down through the generations. Nothing would ever wear out. This is an important thing to consider, whether or not this spell affects the world. Like, there are smaller examples than this as well. Something as simple as Sending or Animal Messenger. This is basically a automated computerized system. That's what Sending effectively becomes. First of all, you can make Sending stones, which means that you can use chargers to just send sendings backwards and forwards with no training at all. They would be commodified and sold. Sending would effectively be a telegram system for the entire world. This changes the world completely. This changes diplomacy. It changes logistics for so many different things. Trade deals can be done instantly from countries apart. It changes the military massively. A medieval military would be very, very limited by what knowledge the individual commanders, generals, etc. know at the time. If you have Sending, you can communicate with anyone immediately from anywhere on the planet. You could direct battles so completely. Not only that, you could communicate to anyone anywhere, including the wizard who has a familiar who they can psychically connect to and see through their eyes. You now have drone technology. Because that's what a familiar is. Right? It's an artificially intelligent raven that you can see through its eyes. So you turn that thing out into the sky, you now look through its eyes, you can see the battlefield from above, you then stop seeing through its eyes, you send a sending to the general on the other side of the battlefield, and he now knows where to move his troops. This changes warfare completely. So the sending spell and the find familiar spells, so important. But it's again not the only one. What about Eldritch Blast? This is just one spell. Again, if you take the variant human, they can take a feat at first level. They could take as their spells Eldritch Blast, Mending, and Find Familiar. And they suddenly become incredibly useful on the battlefield. You have someone else with sending, or you give them a sending stone, or scrolls of sending, and they are now indispensable. Right, first of all, their weapons never break, their armour never breaks, you don't need to buff out any armour, you don't need to repair anything, you just cast Mending and everything's immediately fixed. Their familiar is effectively drone reconnaissance in animal form. It doesn't matter how many times you destroy it, you can just keep resummoning it. So, that's that sorted, but Eldritch Blast is machine gun in spell form. As you level up, you can create multiple blasts each time. But what Eldritch Blast is the ability to create a blast of damage that does force, which is a kind of damage type that isn't really covered much. But things like, Blade Ward or the Rage ability for a Barbarian, when they give you resistance to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning, or the physical damage types, they don't give you resistance to force. So it's reasonable to assume that force damage bypasses defenses that stop physical damage. So general shields and other kinds of barriers. So other magical defenses that would give you resistances are not going to be affecting this spell. Same applies, by the way, to Magic Missile. If you want to, you can cast this every single round. And if you're high enough level, you're casting it once a round and you're doing it multiple times. Like, you cast it once and you're sending multiple bolts at the same time. You can quicken it, or twin it, or quicken and twin it to cast multiple at a time. You get a high-level sorcerer with Eldritch Blast from a feat, like Spell Sniper. Spell Sniper is even better than that, because that now means it ignores cover. And you now have a homing gun. You take your arcane rod, you point it at someone, you cast twinned Eldritch Blast, and you target someone. If you're level 10, for example, that sorcerer is now firing 6 bolts in 6 seconds. That's a shot a second. That's semi-automatic rate. That's a hell of a lot of firepower. Not only that, they're homing bullets. They're homing bullets that can travel the entire length of the Eldritch Blast. You make that a warlock instead of a sorcerer, and they may not be able to fire it as often, but then they can take Eldritch invocations that give them things like... Sorry about that, phone call. So yeah, if you make them a warlock, then they've got Eldritch Spear and Agonizing Blast, which means that their shots are doing more damage, and they can shoot it at a ridiculous distance of 300 foot, which admittedly isn't actually that ridiculous, but this is, at D&D ranges, 300 foot is one of the longest that you can do. You take Spell Sniper, that doubles to 600 foot. This is now bigger than any other spell range-wise that you can get 600 foot. That's 200 yards. That's really quite far. I mean, admittedly, from a bow's perspective, it's not actually that far, but this is the longest range a bow can reasonably shoot in D&D. Like, the ranges are all a bit off, because they don't want to have to model really long-range fights. But yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing where Eldritch Blast and Magic Missile would ruin all kinds of warfare, when you can basically give someone a wand and they can just repeatedly cast and just blast people over and over. You have Fireball, which is artillery. It's an artillery shot. You can stand a person on the battlefield and they can go boom and blow up a whole unit of people. You now have napalm strikes. How is this not affecting warfare? So yeah, magic in D&D. It's a tech creator. What magic is it's a replacement for technology. And we really should acknowledge that in our fantasy. Both in games like Dungeons & Dragons, and in video games, in TV shows, in films, and in books. If you've got magic, you need to account for the fact that the magic is going to change the way society works. And I don't think there's enough people who actually consider these things. A lot of fantasy fiction, when they're writing these magic systems, they'll have these amazing magic spells, but the world will be completely unchanged, as if the spell has no impact other than the person who's casting it right now can do the thing. And that bores me. So, yeah, that's something I was thinking of, and I thought it'd make a good chat. Until next time, I'll see you later, and yeah, I'll have some other interesting things to say about the way that fantasy worlds, especially the likes of D&D, are put together, because there's many different things that I think we really do need to talk about. Things that we don't consider that should change the world. Until then, bye.